It's my privilege to introduce our guests today, Kery Mortenson and Tim Gillum of Baxter Healthcare. I've known Kery through his work at ISPI. Dr. Stepich and I were lucky enough to see an early version of this presentation when we presented at the CISPI conference last year. Performance improvement practitioners often struggle with the well-intentioned but ill-informed request for training that our clients bring us. How do we shape their expectations so we can do right by them in ways that improve valued workplace performance? How do we move from order takers to strategic partners? Kery and Tim's ledge walking technology provides answers to these questions, so I asked them to host this webinar for us. During their time with us, Kery and Tim will describe their ledge walking technology, show how OPWL practitioners can use it, and answer your questions. Kery and Tim, we're delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
And the presentation is yours.
Sweet. We're loading up here. Cool. Let's make sure we got fun stuff here. We're good, Kery. Yeah. Good. So, and if you're wondering which one of us is which, Kery's the good-looking guy. I'm the other one. And long and short of it, in Baxter, our performance team is in an interesting spot. We actually report through the quality organization, which doesn't seem like a logical fit. But with most performance programs, folks don't know where to put us. The great part about being in this quality organization is we have full access to all of our sites, and we actually get outside of our functional area quite often. And so, I mean, remember, Baxter is a pharmaceutical medical device company. We make anything from saline bags to pumps to recombinant proteins for bleeding disorders. We manufacture in 27 countries, and we actually distribute in 127. And so when we're talking about the global field that we're working in, we're on the hook for performance solutions for about 35,000 of these folks in about 30 countries. And so our frequent flyer mile card gets punched quite often, and our understanding of localization is pretty key as well. And that'll probably be the last piece that we kind of touch on Baxter, but that's the commercial we're requested to give. And so what we want to do today is really focus on, you know, the challenge that we face from being order takers to performance partners. And really, we put it into four buckets. I mean, we got to achieve business results. And, you know, we don't measure our success by volume of people in a given learning class or things of this sort. We look and understand the language of the business. The other one is we apply systems thinking. And the reason for that is delayed gratification is not a skill that many leaders have. They don't understand that patience and staying the course is a key piece. We also take a learner-centric approach to add value. And basically, Baxter, like many companies, is a very, very relationship-based company. So partnerships are a key piece for us.
Yeah, and then in that learner-centric approach, Tim and I have had the opportunity to work here at Baxter for about 5 years. And so when we got a picture of the current culture and the way learning was done, we saw that, you know, like when we would watch or attend some of these sessions, they're flat out awful. It was death by PowerPoint. There was an instructor that was what I would call breaking the top 10 rules of being an instructor. And so what we had to start driving the changes, if we are going to do any learning, we first have to make space to replace some of that with what we call high impact learning. And so part of our strategy is we reduce the volume of non-value added in order to create space for valued high impact. And part of that high impact piece is really having the instructor focus on the learner and their outcome and not so much on them. And part of that requires us to build effective partnerships across different business sectors. So, for example, some of the work we're doing now involves people from across the globe that represent commercial, marketing, sales, quality, engineering, HR, operations, plant managers, plant quality managers as well. So one of the things that's helped us in helping our clients understand what we mean by performance improvement and how, this ledge walking piece is how do we pull leaders off the ledge that are going down the solution that they've already identified as it's just a 4-hour e-learning and just put it together and send it, versus really understanding holistically what are some of the challenges and some of the solutions that we would call non-instructional. And so we use this activity called the bar napkin technology. It's really simply is if you take a napkin, and the beauty of a napkin is it's very easy. It's you can use a portrait, you can use it landscape. But what we have you do first, and if you have a pad of paper at your desk, is if you think about some of the top initiatives that you would have in your organization, the top 3, we'd ask you to list that out on the top left-hand column. And we do this exercise very quickly. And then what we do is we ask them, for each of those 3 initiatives that you have, what is the solution? And we ask them to break it down into 3 buckets. Is it specifically just a learning solution that we have to either provide instructor-led, on the job, e-learning, awareness, or communication? Or is it something what we would call non-instructional? Better hiring or selection of the right people, better work environment, better incentives, better whatever. We call that a non-instructional. And or is it somewhat of a blended? So they do that for each of those 3 initiatives. And then what we then ask is really the key probing question. I'll let Tim, why don't you talk about the tax step benefit?
Right. And so basically, the order taker in a learning function, when folks come up with their key initiatives and they hear that the solution really is a learning solution, we take the order, we go process, we develop what's asked, and then we measure, maybe a level 1, level 2 type assessment. What Kery and I are trying to get folks to understand is the next question to ask is, if it's a learning solution, is this a tax, a staff benefit, or a business driver? A tax is a learning solution that the only thing you get out of it is your receipt. We work in a regulated environment. We pay many taxes to appease FDA guidance. There's many taxes for Sarbanes-Oxley. There's taxes for OSHA requirements. There's sure the Boise State has no generic tax, right? But those are paid as well. Or is it a staff benefit? I go to training. It's a great experience. You fed me well. It's in a great location, but there's no practical application back on the job. So really, it's something that I like to do, and I feel like it's a benefit. Or the third piece, is it a business driver? Can I take the learning and directly apply it to my work environment and see tangible results? And this is where we start to see the leaders who are authentic really start to think about where things are at. Now, I'm not saying that most leaders aren't authentic. I'm just saying most are confused at most times, and they already have a solution, and they're put off that we're even asking this question. The answer statement is, and when they tell me it's a business driver, the answer is good. What are the key behaviors we're seeing that's going to be different, and how are they going to be applied? And that's where we get the 4th column is around those key behaviors and results.
That napkin exercise is also a great mirror check for us as performance improvement professionals. So if I look at my list of the top 5 initiatives that I have going on, and I see that only one of those is a business driver, I'm not in the right pocket. If I'm really truly driving performance, I should be focused on those initiatives that are driving results, as Tim mentioned on the front end, and what we would call going after those business drivers. So it's also a great mirror test when you look at what work you have on your platter and which ones are really perceived as business drivers.
One of the questions we get quite often is, do you guys really use a bar napkin? The answer is yeah. We actually have multicolored ones for different times of the year. So right now we're in October, and following NFL protocol, we have pink napkins for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And the other question is, Kery addressed it, why the bar napkin? Because it represents the attention span of most folks who are bringing us projects. They don't have time to unravel a whole roll of toilet paper and have us write things down. what they have time for is what's captured on this bar napkin. We actually flip the bar napkin over and do some other things with that. And that's what this ledge walking technology is about. Literally, we can fit every bit of question answer type fit that you see on this process flow on that bar napkin. And that's our summary sheet for our guiding principles and where things are at. It's also a visible demonstration of simplifying the complex. When leaders see that you can solve an issue on a napkin, they get the grasp of where things are at. And so when we're talking ledge walking technology, this is the succinct piece of the tools that you're going with. So we've already started on the left-hand column there with the instructional solutions and the tax benefits. And we'll talk a little bit more of these tools as we get going on. One of the questions from the chat, was, are you going to have access to the PowerPoint slides? The answer is yes. We can make these available. That's not a problem. So, and when folks are asking what is the core premise of ledge walking, it's captured really on this sheet.
Yep. All right. So some of the tools that we're going to cover, or some of the standards that we want to anchor to, is as we looked at these key things that are important for us in the performance improvement is, how do we really get to the business results and outcomes? How do we take that systemic view and determine cause? How do we add value establishing those partnerships with clients? And how do we bake in those solutions that sustain success and sustain those behaviors over time? And then lastly is, by the time you get done with doing all that work, how do you get back to the leader with a very simple evaluation strategy and a simple outcome base that you can get in front of the client? And what we found is, like Tim mentioned, the attention span of all these leaders is really short because they have a lot going on. So what we've done is just simply applied some very simple, fast, but predictive tools that provide credibility as far as meeting each of those standards. The first one we're going to talk about is the magic wand. And if you look at Covey's 7 habits, habit number 2, he says, start with the end in mind. And so for us, that's really key, is to understand from the leader or leadership group, what is the, if you were to take a magic wand, and we actually have magic wands for them to hold, touch, and feel, and we have them wave it in the meeting and say, if you were to wave this magic wand and tomorrow we all go into work and it's different, the desired state has happened, what would it look like? What would you see? What would your target audience be doing differently? And what we have in a room, we did this actually last week, a couple weeks ago, we had 41 people in a room, global leaders from all over, and we gave them the magic wand. And what we do is they capture each of their insights to those questions on a sticky note. What we do is we capture 205 of those sticky notes. Tim goes through an axial coding and creates a very simplistic desired state of what that new world looks like. That's important for us. It's also important for them because it solidifies now what does desired state look like, and how do we know when we get there?
Right. And so, a couple key points. First, the collection of the information, it's one thought per Post-it note.
Yep.
One of the questions that's coming through the chat is around what axial coding is.
Yep.
And so what an axial code is you start to see themes of pockets of commonalities on what desired state looks like. If I were to ask you all to define your key vacation, some people will say they want to go to a beach. Some people are going to say that they want to go to a mountain. Some people want to go skiing. Some people, but what I'm seeing as the axis on that is location is a key selection criteria for things there. So the desired state for your ideal vacation on that axis is location dependent, and we would include that inside of the desired state. Once you see the axis of location, you find all the things that are location dependent and you put things around there. And so what we did in that room full of 40 folks is we usually find the top 4 to 7 themes that are there and make sure that they're included in the desired state statement. And it comes on to a slightly a run-on sentence, but you get to a point where in order for us to understand the language that our partners or our folks we're working on are speaking, and for us to speak their language and their results, this is a key piece. The other question we get is, hell, with 205 of those things in a given session, it's not always 205, by the way, is, how long does that really take? The answer is we can get this whole activity done in less than 15 minutes. All right. And this is the first step of building credibility from what would be a learning person to a performance person. You now ask the question and you now get a understanding.
Okay. And Candy and Alan, thanks for your questions. Couple questions there is you're going to see we use some other HPT models. The one that we use that we're going to cover here briefly is Gilbert's 6L causal analysis, the HPT analysis. And you'll see we use some other framework models that we'll introduce as we go through this session. The other beauty of this is Tim mentions it's simplistic and it gets everyone on board to what that desired state looks like. And one of the other tools we use that you'll see is we're very big on using impact mapping to draw what that desired state looks like for the client end in mind, and then we work back from there. So that desired state fuels our next tools that we use as it comes through the pipeline.
Yeah, and the point that Candy's making about just because doesn't mean your behavior is going to change. You're spot on.
Spot on.
And even when I know and I'm reinforced, sometimes my behavior doesn't change. I have a 12-year-old son, brilliant kid, but he doesn't like to do his homework. And no matter what we do, I haven't found he knows he's got to do his homework, but that behavior really hasn't changed all that much yet. So if you have the solution for that one, we will gladly take that. But one of the things that we do get around understanding what's keeping people from doing things that they know comes along with the 6L analysis.
So one of the things that after we know what the desired state is, the next question that we ask is, so let's reflect back on current state. What's preventing us from getting to that desired state? And we use a very simple job aid that has targeted questions to each of the 6Ls, the top 3 that address the environmental or organizational impediments, and then the bottom 3, which are really focused more on the individual. Questions such as, for example, in the data and information bucket, what data or where do you get information about how to perform a certain step or task? What guiding or predicting or leading indicators do you have that are available that tells you you're moving in the right direction or aren't moving in the right direction? So for example, it's very easy for us to spot if there's a metric gap that will tell us if we're getting to desired state or not. Instrumentation, we look at the tools, resources. We commonly here do a lot of process re-engineering, and we assume that building the new IT system that supports it will help us get to the desired state, only to find out that the system is slow, cumbersome, and doesn't allow all the data inputs that are needed. In the motivation and incentive, we're asking people to do something differently and to do it a different way that may take more time and is harder to do. And when we ask leaders about, so if I do this well, what's the incentive for me to keep doing it this way? And if the room is quiet or they can't provide the answer, that provides us what the gap is. So what we do after that questioning period, and this process takes about 30 to 40 minutes, no longer. We then can take that information and then we typically put those 6 buckets instead of all being in the green. We'll reference the major gaps are the ones, is there a slide before that?
No, sir.
The major gaps, they'll get a red in the box. And if there's a minor gap towards that desired state, it'll be yellow. And if there's anything positive, it'll get a green. And what you do is you take that picture and go back to this group, this leadership group, and say, you have major gaps in these areas, minor gaps in these areas, and you'll see that the solution requires a blended approach and a holistic approach. If we only fix one of the red boxes, but we don't address the major gaps in the other red boxes, our chance to get to that desired state is minimized.
And there's other process tools and lean tools, and I think Candy mentioned 5 whys. Yeah. The reason we don't directly go into that technology or that use at this point in time is because asking 5 whys on people in general without giving them some smaller buckets to work on it causes some churn in where things are at. By taking a similar 5 why approach, but more in the context of a 6-cell analysis, it targets things already into groupings, buckets, or actionable pieces, and starts to get folks to think bigger. The other thing is when you get the 5 whys, and for folks who've used that tool and any other DMAIC tool that's out there, training is always a solution. The interesting thing is, if you notice on this 6-cell, the knowledge bucket there is 1 of 6. So when, one of the things that we were talking about earlier is how do you get some of our leaders and folks to transform from seeing us as simply order takers, is to show them that if we only take orders, we're only satisfying 1 out of 6 boxes. Yeah. So it's also a contextual frame for our leaders to learn of more of a performance piece and not simply the learning capacity.
And I think what that conveys, at the beginning, I think of this talk, we're talking about how do you change the paradigm of your relationship with leaders. When you start going down this path of driving what desired state is and identifying holistically the gaps, it puts you outside of, you're not just the training representative. You're really focused on driving performance improvement. And so it starts to change that perception of what we do and how we do it. Then you wanted to go to the solutions. There we go. One more thing. So after we identify those gaps, we simply look at what are all those gaps, and we put it on a very simple sheet like this that shows in the data and information. Here were some of the common gaps that were identified: unclear role expectations, inconsistency in procedures, manager inconsistency, current metrics are lagging, not leading indicators, current goal setting contributes to unclear expectations. And if you look at those gaps, very few of them are addressed by learning. It requires additional non-instructional solutions. So what we do is we work with them to help them identify what are the solutions for those gaps that pose the least amount of effort, but the highest benefit to driving to desired state. So for each of those solutions, in some cases, there may be 30 gaps. For each of those gaps, there's a solution with an effort benefit weight behind it. And the time it takes to do that?
Not much time at all. I mean, half hour on the outside. And, the key piece that we're talking about is where there's a non-instructional solution, we don't just throw that over the fence and say, good luck to you, we can't help you. Because many of the non-instructional solutions leverage skill sets that Kery and I and our staffs have. And so one of the things that you'll see is, folks ask for a performance aid or a job aid or even though that's not an instructional bit of material, it's something that we can help put together. There's other organizational development type attributes that are sometimes needed that we can help with. And then so basically the other credibility piece is where there's a choice to move forward. We make sure that we stay engaged with these folks and help. And so the impact map, Kery, is, folks are, talking about just because they know doesn't mean they're going to make the change.
Right.
And that's why using a tool like this and sequence is a key piece.
So we found that's a huge value for us in our arsenal and working in this space is, I think one of our colleagues on the phone mentioned earlier is like, you've got to really go after the behaviors and sustaining that, because if you don't get after those behaviors, they've gone through the motions, but you won't see any change. So remember the magic wand exercise we did up front. That simply gets loaded on the right-hand column of the impact map under organizational goals or desired state. Then what we ask is with that group, so what are the key either individual or team results that we'd expect to see that would be good leading indicators to tell us, are we getting closer to desired state? Are we not there yet, or we've achieved it? And a lot of times with the leadership, when they look at their current metrics, you'll find that those current metrics don't align and are not good indicators of the organizational goals. So they've got to, one of the solutions is to implement the right measurement. Once we know what those measurements are, we just simply ask the question, so of the target audience, whether it be supervisors, a specific role, or a senior leadership role, what are the critical behaviors you'd need to see demonstrated in that individual that would show that it's driving one or more of those key results. And what we then do is, once we know what those behaviors are, and most of the time it's a matter of 3 to 5 critical behaviors, we validate that those behaviors actually would impact either favorably or unfavorably one of those results in that second column. And how we validate that is a very simple exercise. We just ask people in the room to tell us a story. If I saw Tim demonstrating that first behavior, what results would you expect to see, and how does that impact desired state? If that behavior doesn't drive any of those behaviors, or only a few, we're going to disregard it. We're only after the key behaviors that, if they're done right, will accomplish what's in the third column and then drive the organizational result. The beauty of this is from Robert Brinkerhoff's work in success case methodology. Once we know what those behaviors are, measuring the behaviors is fast, predictable, and credible.
Yep. And one of the other questions or comments coming through the chat was around using the non-instructional solutions that we can help with to get basically a seat at the table. And I think one of the things that Kery and I focus on is we're never worried about having a seat at the table, because people who sit down at the table talk and they don't work. And so I think the other framework that we want to impart on folks who are trying to make the transformation from order taking to really that performance consultant type role is, don't worry about the seat at the table. What you need to be is the hand, hearts, and head of leading some of these things that have business impact. And so the mental change from belling up to a table to standing and ready and engaged is a key phraseology. Now, with that change in phraseology, the use of that tool to be seen as a valued partner is absolutely true, because it shows that you're more than an order-taking, e-learning generating machine. And so that's a key piece on that. The other one to get folks to understand your level of partnership and understanding is this impact map, because now many times this is the first time the leaders have been able to take their thought from what they intrinsically know and have it shared on a broader basis. I mean, there's some projects we've done, at the end of the day, this is all that was needed, was to create the line of sight between what the behaviors are and what the overall vision was and how to line that through. And it's interesting because Kery and I keep actually net promoter scores on the folks that we're working with. And we ask them, at the end of the day, how many of you folks would actually recommend our services, whether it be simply an impact map, building a learning solution, or somewhere between, to other folks? And we currently got data points from about 120 different folks internally. And that answer is 100% of the folks would recommend our services and do recommend our services otherwise. And I think we'll talk a little bit more in detail as we go on with that.
And this is from Brinkerhoff's, the beauty of going after these behaviors. Typically after an intervention or solution session that we do with these groups, and they leave with their action plan and plan to go forward, we go after those people at about 3 to 4 weeks after the intervention and ask them, have they used the behaviors, and are you getting positive results? You've started to use the behavior and are not sure, and or you're not doing it at all. And the beauty of this is per Brinkerhoff's method, is it really helps our work where you can get to the skinny on, are these behaviors driving any impact? And so it provides the beautiful story of providing quantifiable results for leadership, as well as on the ground, what we call ground truth stories about, is it working or not working? And if it's not working, why not? If you can answer those two questions to a leader or a group of leaders who are going after this important initiative, is it taking hold or not? And if it's not taking hold, what's preventing it from growing deeper? So your discussion doesn't have to focus around providing an ROI calculation on why a training course is working or not working, because the proof of the pudding really is when leaders go back on the floor, do they see the change or not? And do they see it different? And are they hearing at the ground truth level that things are starting to change? Rather, the conversation gets focused on, hey, we're at a 20% impact right now. There's 20% of your population that is using these behaviors. What would it take for us to grow it to 25%? to 30%. And you see now it changes the dynamic from trying to go and improve that something we built is credible to how do we drive a higher level of business impact.
Right. And the bookends on this really are roughly 15% on either end of this. And the success cases that we've run find that to be pretty solid close of where things are at. The other question that's coming through is, we're asking the question, is the work even worth doing? Mm-hmm. And it depends on what is. And so if you're saying, is it worth it to the organization? Kery and I struggle with that on a pretty frequent basis. I mean, Baxter's mission is to make products that are basically sustaining and enhancing life at the end of the day. And some of the taxes that we pay along with it at the end of the day don't add to the value proposition of that. So the question is, is it worth, fixing or doing? And when Kery and I first started this performance transformation from training to real performance, we only had about 20% of the population that would even entertain anything other than. So we really had no say in whether it was worth fixing or not. We were expected to be an order taker, and that's how it's going to go. And 20% of the people actually entertained us. Today, we actually have about 60% of our activity and solution that is more performance driven. But the interesting thing is the 40% of the folk, or 40% that really isn't people not wanting to work with us. It's us choosing not to pursue down the path with them. And so we've gone from that place of not having a say to something. And we do get to a point where there's certain things when you do the calculations, it's just not worth doing. Mm-hmm. In Baxter, we had $3.3 million of learning recorded in our learning management system. We got 70,000 people. It equates out to about 62 hours per person per year as we grow with some of our integrations. The ASTD bench for that organization of our size is roughly 37 hours per person. I'm not claiming that bench is correct, but I'll tell you that, 25 points over bench is definitely wrong. And so we still have a lot of room to go to trim some of that learning solution out, and also some of the change elements of where things are at. So brilliant question on, are things worth fixing? The question of how long did it convert? It seems like an eternity. Kery had hair when we started. I had hair. But no, Kery and I both started with Baxter roughly 4.5 years ago. It took us a year to get our feet underneath us and to understand who we were. But basically, the answer to your question is we're 4.5 years into the journey with some pretty solid traction on where things are at. We started to see slow results probably 14 to 16 months in, and then an exponential piece after that, and we haven't slowed down since.
Yeah. What's interesting, we've started to see, we talked about when we first started, and the nature of our business. In some cases, we do need to just build an order taker because there's been a commitment to an agency or something that this would be done. But as we get more entrenched in actually doing the performance improvement work, what we're seeing is those people tell other people, and they see another leader with an issue or a problem they're trying to work on, and they refer us. So we don't have a marketing plan, nor do we need one, because people are coming in and saying, I'm supposed to ask you guys to help me. And when we ask them the why question, they say, well, I was talking with another leader and they said, you can really help us drive the right results. So that's why I'm here. So we see that the volume of the requests are moving now more into that space. The other piece, will we talk about yes and coming up?
Stone soup, actually.
Yeah. So we'll talk about stone soup. Is some cases they'll give the ask for a learning intervention, but we'll start to use what we call yes and approach, where we say, well, okay, we can do that, but what I can also do is find some of the non-instructional solutions that you should be looking at to give you greater impact. And now I've got their attention. The other thing that we haven't mentioned yet is we are the last people in the room to mention the T word. If you mention the T word in a room, they automatically assume that's a solution. So what we do is let's focus on results first and how to get there. It might be a T solution, a training solution, but most of the time we find it's blended or not that at all.
Yeah, and understanding what Kery is talking about with yes and the stone soup. So yes and is an improv tool or action, and basically it's always building on a scene or an interaction. And Kery and I actually spend time with Second City, the troupe that puts Saturday Night Live on, to learn some improv skills and really understand how to do that, because when you're working with key leaders and you keep on getting no but, you get frustrated. And by using yes and skills, it becomes almost an improv skit for us that we can work with. But the story of stone soup is we can feed a village with a cauldron of water and a stone. And once we get the leader bought in, that they put their stone into the cauldron and we got the fire going and we taste it, and they're like, well, let me have a taste of that. No, it's not done yet. It'd be really, really good if you add 2 carrots, or if you add 2 turnips. And so by the time we're finished and we actually have a stew that feeds the village, the end statement is the leader doesn't feel that incremental push quite as heavy. And we run on a very cost-effective model, and so we don't charge these folks a charge back or try to bleed them dry on things of the sort. And so that's the other key piece where that's at.
George, you asked a great question. What was the biggest obstacle in your first year to 18 months?
That's our filter clicking on. I can hear our legal team right now. To me, the key challenge that we had is people had their perception of what a performance or learning team looks like, and what we should do and what space we shouldn't have. And so the other thing is that since we reported to a corporate quality function, no one wants to see a corporate quality function show up at a site or at a sales meeting or things like that, because we're quality people, right? So we're going to audit you. We're going to tell you what's wrong. We're not going to make a hands-on difference for where you're at. We're just going to cause you more work. And so I think the top 3 things that probably caused us grief early on was Kery and I didn't know each other and the skills that we brought. So figuring out the blend of what we both bring to a table and our staffs, and really making those skills transparent to the organization was one. 2, placement in the organization and reputation was another challenge. I mean, Kery would show up at plants and he'd be like, "Hey, I'm Kery. I'm the throw over the fence guy," just to try to cut the ice on that. And then the third piece was just the organizational perception of what training needs to be, and it was more of the tax and the compliance regimen as opposed to the performance solution. And like most pharmaceutical companies, we suffer from a couple syndromes. More is better and audit paranoia. We're so scared that we're going to get audited that we just do so many things that are over the top that are non-value add, that folks are fearful in that space.
I think one of the challenges for us starting too is we could not play hard to get on the front end because there was so much to do. I mean, the good thing is there's so much to do, but doing the right thing versus the quick and easy thing, that was a challenge. So we had to wade through that to really, and trying to find and latch on to what were those projects that provide business value. Those were the ones we latched onto, and then showed how we could do it differently.
Well, the interesting one is we had our lead of quality, or that is our top leader, and we couldn't get permission to work. I mean, no, don't do this, do this. To finally get him to move, I bet him a case of beer that we could do something in 3 weeks and have the impact that he wanted. And I mean, he was a kind of a betting guy, and he was Irish. I was going to win this one way, shape, or form. And he took the bet. And now I owed him a case of beer because it took us 4 weeks, not 3 weeks. But what he recognized was that we were able to deliver a solution with limited impact to the organization as far as resources that had a high impact on results. He was willing to try that again. And that was that first key step. The second key step was reputation when we got to our first site and did work. And the funny thing is, some of our manufacturing sites are now offering us apartments to stay down there and just work with them. And those are some of the greatest compliments we get is you guys aren't corporate guys. And
For us, that's the ultimate compliment when they say that.
Yeah, and they're seeing the results of where that's at. One of the other tools we use is a pulse check. This is a culture pulse. It's a fancy tool, let me tell you. It's a flat word file that has a list of words on it. Because when we're trying to understand the probability of success, someone pointed out earlier, I might know what I need to do. I might understand how to do it. I might have the capability to do it, but I might choose not to do it. And a lot of that is because if you think of a thinking path where you have results, behaviors, feelings, and thoughts and feelings are what define the culture and really ultimately sustaining behavior change. And so this allows us at a very quick bit to see where folks are thinking and feeling at that moment. We were doing work with a call center up in Canada, and we did this culture pulse, and all they do is they circle the words where they feel at that moment. And what we found is they were feeling left out, not engaged, but they felt extremely capable, knowledgeable, and things of the sort. Other data proved that they were capable and knowledgeable, but the motivation and engagement was low. The solution that the person up in our facility was asking for was to give them call center training, teach them how to answer the phones. But they're already capable and knowledgeable. Yeah, but they need something. They need something else. And so what we did was we brought in Second City from the Toronto location and did improv training. What they felt was valued, engaged. They did learn some new communication tools and how to do some of the yes and where things are at. So we still provided a learning solution, just a slightly different one based on some of the knowledge we have with the culture pulse. When we have different sessions and we see a shift in the thoughts and feelings, so if you have an excited workforce at first and then all of a sudden you have a disengaged one, we know we got some problems and we got to get in going. And most of those are non-instructional type solutions. This helps solidify the case with our different leaders.
And how we've got this pulse now is we use an audience response system where each person gets a little clicker, and we probe these feelings and thoughts up on the screen. And so they simply go through a very quick clicking exercise. So it's a very quick survey that we can do before the intervention and at the end, especially when we're asking these leaders to go back and drive culture change and take action that are really difficult to move a person from a low level of confidence or almost a fearful mode to where they feel engaged, confident that they can make this happen. That's a great predictor, early success, that it's going to take off.
The question is the pulse check a survey? I mean, if you want to put it into a bucket, sure, but it's a one question survey. Tell me, circle all the things that you're feeling and thinking right now. Like I said, we can use the automated response tool, which makes our life easier because it drops it to an Excel and actually calculates for us. Or we go old school and just do the piece of paper and tick and tack on that. So what we can do is provide a copy of that to the folks at Boise State, and they can make it available to you. The tools that we have, they're non-proprietary. We're more than happy to share with y'all. Okay. Please.
Yeah. So here's some of the principles we learned in this journey to move to performance is we can't assume that people see your value. One of the easiest ways that I found personally how to do that, at the end of any kind of interaction, interface, discussion, at the end of that, I just simply ask, was this helpful? I don't get specific. I just say overall. And they're really willing to share I didn't think of it this way before, but you've helped me see it in a new light. So it's really important to just don't leave the meeting and assume that the value has been achieved, is to check. And then this one it's very different. I'm not out proclaiming the ROI of this program is whatever it is we usually minimize the spotlight. It's really not about us. One of the recent situations that we had, the IT group had asked us to do some analysis for their global audience on project management improvement. And the sponsor of the initiative, she was a senior director. And so we went in, and in 2 weeks, we did like 8 or 9 focus groups, put together the summary, presented the executive summary to her and her staff, and that was we were done. And about a month later, she presented that to her leadership team and got promoted. And that's okay for us. So it's about, we kind of offer a guarantee is that if the solution works, you get all the credit. If it doesn't work, you blame us. So there's a win-win option. There's no lose for them. So you want to talk about the phone call?
Yeah, and basically, as a partner, we don't cut the ties and move on. Folks know that we're a phone call away.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, people were a little skittish at first, like, no, you won't pick up the phone, you won't answer our emails or whatnot. We're in Chicago. We have a facility out in Irvine, California, and the folks in Irvine tested us. We weren't home more than a few hours, and my cell phone was blowing up because they had a need. I answered their question on the phone, but what they also needed was a immediate response to a non-instructional solution that needed some help. And basically, we got back on a plane and went back, or actually, two of us went back out there and spent some time and fixed the problem. And so that word of mouth spread very, very quickly where things are at. The other one that, where Kery was nibbling around, the don't assume that people see your value. I would add, and sometimes it matters and sometimes it doesn't. We a lot of times, if we start explaining the performance tool to folks up front, we lose them. They don't get it. They don't want to spend time doing it. So what we do is we'll do the work, and they say, wow, how in the heck did you do that? And then we give them a taste to see where they're at. So part of that is driving the results and then having folks ask you how you got around doing that. And that gets to let the business leader sell your successes. Basically, we get folks stopping by, and we get quite a bit of additional questions asked, partnerships, and you talk about seats at the table or whatnot. We sit at more tables than and like I said, sitting at them is kind of boring. We want to do the work. And so I think that's our frustration. A lot of times we get asked to sit at the table. We don't want to sit. We want to get the work done.
Yeah.
The other one is, continual network inside and outside, that continuous improvement. We are always sharpening our saw. One of the other things that we can do, and this answers one of the questions that's in the chat, is, what tools do you use to go and really understand the needed solutions? We actually use a modified SWOT analysis, and that's an old tool. We have an Excel macro that's built. We can actually do a SWOT, do an IFE metrics, which compares strengths and weaknesses to give a quantitative feel to the question. It says it's a 1 through 4 scale, basically. If you score a 2 to a 4, that means you're coming from a place of strength. Closer to 4, the stronger you are. If you're between a 1 and a 2, your weaknesses are going to chew you up. Better close those out first.
Yeah.
Opportunities and threats the same way. Above a 2, closer to 4, go after your opportunities first. But if it's below that 2 mark, then you need to go after and hedge those threats. What we used at that point in time is Tiagi's 21 activity. And it's a fun tool. Once again, we'll be more than happy to share our template on that tool. But if Kery and I were part of a team in a room, we'd ask them simply, write down the solution that you will drive the results. One, they have a solution in mind. Get it spoken so you can see it, to know what's underneath the surface and you don't know is there. But as soon as they get a chance to write down what their one solution would be, we immediately have them give it to the person next to them. They have to give their idea away. From there, they get in groups of 3, and they have the idea that they received from somebody else with 2 other people who have ideas that aren't theirs, and they're discussing which of the 3 is the best idea, which is the second best idea, which is the third best idea. And basically, it's a 3-2-1 rating scale. They do that 7 rounds with different people, and what we do is we can see what the most pressing priority type actions are around that situation. Yeah. So that Tiagi's 21 activity is absolutely phenomenal.
Candy, your question about how do we get the benefits to the members of the organization? We typically start that conversation when we're meeting with a sponsor. If they can articulate what the desired state looks like, then we'll ask them, so why are you doing that? Why is it important? What's the business impediment to do that? And then it's always the next question we're asking is, so what are the consequences if whatever intervention you pull on this and the members don't exhibit those behaviors? What are the consequences for them, or what are the consequences for the business if you don't get success? If the sponsor can't articulate, then we've got some work to do. But we typically call that the business case. And if we're building any kind of solution for the client, That's the first thing we start with is, why are you here? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what's the consequence if we fail? And that I think gauges the audience. This continually network inside and out. Tim and I, what we find is these tools or methods, we test them both inside Baxter, and we've done work for schools, local schools. We've done this work for external companies that are non-compete, so we can actually test these tools and see how they work. And the other thing we've been doing lately is we offer what's called a day in the life of. So if you're ever in the neighborhood, we offer what's called a day in the life for people either that from internal to Baxter want to know more about how we do, or external. They spend a day and we actually immerse them into the work we're doing with the clients, so they see how we use some of these tools.
Yeah, when Kery's talking about, the transfer, the applicability of these tools outside of just the business environment, I mean, to give you a real outside one, we did this for a summer camp down in the Shawnee National Forest in Southern Illinois with the camp counselors who were putting a new safety program together for a climbing wall. How we got involved with that's a different story. But it's basically allowing us to practice and hone our craft in a safe environment. And I think that's the other piece, is if the only time that it matters is when the game is on the line in business or where things are at, I mean, you're not going to win every one, or you're going to have some setbacks. Mm-hmm. The and is, if you're applying these tools for a greater purpose and outside yourself, you get the benefit of practicing as well. And that's a key piece. And that gets to that share selflessly and pay it forward. And that's why Kery and I are honored and privileged to be, with you guys right now, is hopefully, some of these tools, some of the thought process that you have help you. And if they do, please share them going forward with other folks. And this is a small, community we live in, and there's plenty of space for everybody. So we need to make sure that we're sharing.
Yeah, the mediums we use to communicate benefits. If the solution is an instructional one, we'll typically embed that on the front end. But other times we've used it is, let's say, for example, in our operations section, where we ask the supervisor to be doing Gemba walks on the floor. We embed that as far as communicating not only the benefits, but the consequences if we do it wrong. So sometimes it's very tactile for the supervisor or manager, built in a job aid, or it might be built in the instructional solution.
So a couple things. The term Gemba is a Japanese term. It means walk where the work is. So it's a lean term. The second thing on medium, with bigger projects, there's project sponsors and senior leadership teams. That's one of the forums or mediums that we use both in writing and in face-to-face meeting. The other one is at the end of each year, we do a year in a summary of all the things that we did. And we do it kind of like you would find in an airport magazine, by the numbers. X number of these done, here's the results, and here's the savings. The interesting thing last year is the savings that we generated from not doing some learning solutions by changing learning solutions from impacting 70,000 people to really only the 30,000 people that needed them. The error reduction that we made by putting things in a native tongue as opposed to just assuming that everyone speaks English actually paid for our group 5 times over. And so we do the immediate median of the results from the project we're working on, but then we also go back and remind folks of the overall benefit of the team that's sitting there.
And that's kind of the fun thing we've learned. So we did this last year for the first time, and we just stepped back and worked with our team and said, so what are all the different projects we've worked on, and what are some of the results? And we filled up 2 3-inch binders that, so if we ever had a conversation with our leadership as far as, well, what have you guys done for me lately? Yep. You take those 2 binders in the room, and it does a lot of talking.
Yep. So the question, Catherine, you had, that you had around, how are we feeding this back into the learning community? We spend a tremendous amount of time with the ISPI. We're advocates of the organization. We speak at many conferences. We just did a webinar for the Montreal chapter. We'll be in LA at the end of the month. We did an activity for Boeing. Where we get stuck is because we are internal to a company. Some of the cases we'd like to share, our legal department really doesn't want us sharing. And so we, in our writing and things, so we actually had a chapter in a book that we had to withdraw because it couldn't pass our legal department. So we're struggling a little bit in that space as far as in writing, but stay tuned. We've actually started to put pen to paper to a book, and where that's at. Now, with some of the more academic type sessions, that's why we're interacting with you all at Boise State. Capella's actually has a student looking to do a case study with us, and so we're getting that through our legal department from an academic bent. So those are some of the things that we have going on. Good. Basically, some reflection for you guys that we were asking, and we don't need answers now, but we'd love some feedback as you go through this, and tell us, what did you learn about yourself? What tools were helpful? What kind of perceptions changed, and what are you going to do differently going forward? And like I said, our email addresses should be in the presentation. Feel free to email us. We'll answer questions. And as time allows, we'd like to interact with you, and we do sincerely mean that in a pay it forward environment. So please take us up on that offer. So,
I think one of the last things, we mentioned the magic wand. You can actually get those things at a dollar store for about $1.50, and they're color coded, and they're one of the simplest, most profound tools we found. As well as the 21 exercise. And then, it's coming up with those tools that are predictable, but they're simple and they're fast and they're fun. And I think that's kind of the secret piece. If you have those things working in your favor, you're going to pull the organization over to moving into the performance improvement. I think once they get the taste of it, they will not go back to a traditional training organization. The smart organizations won't. They'll want to stay in that pocket.
I think just the other bit that I would say in closing is we have several hard conversations on a daily basis. And I had my boss's boss in a meeting, and she wouldn't approve funding for a non-instructional solution that we needed. And my boss was in the room with me, and the conversation that our boss was trying to convey was that she's looking out for our best interest, and that I need to understand that. And the hard conversation I had was that I understand it, but I don't like it nor agree with it. They got bug-eyed that I was going to stand firm on this, but I think that's the other piece is sometimes it's going to feel rough, and you're going to hear no more than you hear yes initially. Don't walk away from it. Those are some of the hard conversations you have and where things are at. The other thing Kery and I experience quite often, especially in facilitating some of these tools, is we use co-facilitation quite heavily, because if we have an obstinate room, we can play good cop, bad cop, and you can figure out which one of us is which. And because basically giving folks a common enemy is the quickest way to speed them to thought and action. So one, be fearless. Two, have some thick skin. And three, we have a good time every day. Maybe the next time we'll bring the brown rabbit and explain that to you. But we're out of time here, guys. So cool.
Your webinar leader knows the brown rabbit, and he can share with you what that means.
George and I share the common enemy problem, so we're good.
We will send you the list of tools. We don't have an external website. We have an internal SharePoint that we keep our projects on. So I don't think we can't give you access to that, but we can give you access to the tools.
We'll send a zip file over to Boise State.
The zip file.
Good. Cool. With that, guys, what other questions before we wrap up?
So if you do pick up the wand or any of these tools and put them into practice, please let us know how it works.
Absolutely.
And if you have any questions about using any of them, we're just a phone call away or email us.
With that, I believe we're finished for the day.
Yep.
Kery, Tim, thank you so much. We really appreciate your sharing your expertise with us. This is great.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
And look forward to seeing you both again. We'll keep in touch.
Good. Okay. Have fun, guys.
All the best.
Thanks. And everyone, this concludes our webinar. Thank you for your participation. And we'll be working with Kery and Tim to get those additional materials posted. Thank you all for being here. Bye-bye now.